What's up, 508 family? So good to be here right now. I know, judging from my head of hair, I'm not your usual host, Michael Turpak, but I can speak for all of us by saying what an honor it is to be here, to be given the privilege to just speak to you and hopefully help you as you receive some of this content. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Jen. I'm 19 years old and I serve on the host team here at the 508. Reiterating what Jimmy said, I just want to honor our pastor Devin for giving us this voice and the whole team for being here.
So I'm Bella. I get to say I'm 19 for one more week. I know I look 27, but that's okay. We can just brush it off. I serve in a few ministries at 508 and the Connect, but right now I'm currently leading Sisterhood. So I just wanted to honor our pastors, our leadership in this church, because it's not a lot of times that we see people like us get a voice and, have a platform. So I just want to really honor you guys.
What's up, everybody? I'm Oscar. I'm 18 years old, just turned 18 maybe a month ago or two. I'm a baby of the group. But I just want to thank everybody for their hard work, all of 508, especially, Pastor Devin, such a great leader and mentor of mine. I serve in the Change Up Ministry. I'm just stepping into 508 I'm in Pastor Devin's communicators class. Such a great leader. But I'm very excited to be here, and let's get rolling.
It's fantastic. And I'm Jimmy, known around here as the hype man. I am 19 years old, in the 508 to serve on the creative team, podcast team. I was leading parking for a while, holding that down.
Yeah, you were.
Mostly, I'm kind of a handyman. I am where I'm needed, and I serve here in our ministry. So guys, today we're going to be talking on the subject of Gen Z. And so what encompasses Gen Z, what really makes up who we are, and what are some misunderstandings or misconceptions about us? Because honestly, the world might view us in a certain way. We might operate in a way that fulfills some of those recognitions, but we really, it's different to an extent. And so I think as Gen Z, we're a misunderstood generation. We're creative, we're passionate, and we're extremely driven. But with all that potential that we have, to some degree, we can be misled without proper counsel or direction. And so today we're going to introduce this sort of segment called Cap or No Cap. And for all you boomers out there, cap means
Fossils.
Lie. No cap means no lie. And so we're going to go through some content today, some misconceptions, some areas we feel are important and significant to Gen Z. And we're going to either give a cap or a no cap on that idea. Jen, why don't you take it off?
Yeah. Let's start with our first statement, and that is Gen Z seeks authenticity. And what do we say for that?
No
cap.
No cap.
That's a no cap, Jimmy.
I'm still
It's
getting
okay.
I'm still catching on.
You're doing great. It's all right.
Actually had to ask permission on, what was cap or no cap before this video. And so you could tell I've aged significantly.
He's on the borderline of boomer and Gen Z.
We still took him under our wing anyway.
Yeah,
But going on to our first statement on Gen Z seeks authenticity, we think we do this. It's because there's a lack of authenticity nowadays.
Yeah.
And from a generation that grew up such in technology and social media,
For sure.
We see two different personas of each person. We see they're on the camera and they're behind the camera.
Absolutely.
So I have a verse lined up here, and it basically just says that we as Gen Z, we don't want to follow a perfect leader. We want to follow a real leader, a leader that
So good.
will show us their strengths, but will also be honest with us when they're weak.
Yeah,
They'll
absolutely.
also show us their midnight cries, if you want to say that. And the verse I have lined up is James 5:16. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's so good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
So there's a verse actually that I wanted to talk about that. It's true, there's credibility in vulnerability. So I feel like when leaders, they step up to that role of being vulnerable with their weaknesses. The Bible, it says that in our weakness is where his power shines. So I feel like when leaders take up on that role and they're like, okay, so this is where I fall short on. And if you do the same, here's how I got better on that part.
Wow.
So we want to lead and we want to be led with authenticity. And there's a verse I wanted to touch up on. It's 2 Corinthians 1:12. It's what we pride in is the testimony of our conscience, because we behaved in the world with simplicity and godly sincerity, not by earthly wisdom, but by the grace of God. So this was Paul writing, and he was just talking, and he mentioned that the only thing that he was actually proud of was living in simplicity. And what does that
Wow.
mean? It means living in integrity and, being open and living with honesty. And today we don't really see much of that. We see a lot of people kind of putting up a front and
Yep.
putting up like a facade of, okay, I'm perfect, I'm this
Sure.
perfect leader, I have no faults, I have no things that I fall short on, but good luck out there. And we want to be led by people who are honest, and that's what kind of Paul was talking about in this verse. And he was just saying, like, the one thing that I pride in is that by the grace of God I was able to live life with simplicity and
Yeah.
with
Wow.
honesty and openness.
So
really
good.
good.
I think that, like, going off of what you said, pastors that, like, I think the most relevant pastors are the most influential pastors.
Absolutely.
Like our very own Pastor Devin Fry, dude's an open book. I mean, he is one of my mentors. So, like, how I choose my mentors is I look at, what they overcame and what they do, and, like,
Mhm.
I look at them as, like, okay, I want to be more like him because he's such a great example and he inspires me.
Mhm.
The guy, he's went through a lot, and it shows the perseverance, the divine will, and it just shows you that if you have somebody leading you that's open like that, you'll feel like, all right, if he can do this, I can do this.
So
And it
good.
has somebody that has that belief in you, and then you will eventually have that belief in yourself.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows that no one's perfect. No, the only perfect man in this world was our very own Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The only one. And it really shows how it shows truth. We live by truth. We live by truth, not just by what the gospel says, but we gotta live the gospel. And if you are a genuine good leader, a leader called by God, you gotta live truth because the truth is the gospel.
It's good.
Come on.
Well, that's the thing. We're not here at the 508 because we have cool clothes or we have
Mhm.
leaders that say fancy words. We're here because of testimonies.
Yeah.
For sure.
Testimonies impact people, it impacts lives, and it builds followers.
For sure.
Absolutely. I think probably the biggest problem in our generation with this whole sense of authenticity is you have social media versus in person.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so there's people who know how to communicate by text or by Snapchat or FaceTime, all these different things. But the second they get around someone, the second they get to see emotion, they panic. And
Yeah.
so it's that sense of I know you from a screen, but I don't know you from a person.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that come to the extent of where we now don't know what's real anymore.
Mhm.
People are doing these things, thirst traps. You see thumbnails on YouTube to draw likes.
Yeah.
It's the sense of, hey, what our content, what we're proposing
Mhm.
as a person is not necessarily what we're showing you. You see that on posters, you see that on profile pictures.
Definitely.
A lot of it looks a lot better than it seems.
It's
Yeah.
all someone's highlight reel. Like
Yeah.
that's what we see. We don't see behind the scenes.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
And that's where we fall into our false confidence sometimes. And I think that we acknowledge someone's authenticity because we do it ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
We put up a front sometimes. We put up a mask, not literally with the pandemic, but sometimes we just have to like filter ourselves. And it's okay to filter an Instagram picture, but it's to a point where we're filtering everything in our lives.
True.
Wow.
It's really good.
Yeah, I really believe that we can't judge ourselves off someone else's highlight reel,
Yeah.
like you said. And so we're seeing, the high moments. We're seeing the wedding photos. We're seeing the graduation photos. We're seeing the new relationship status, but we're not seeing the low times of someone's life.
Mhm.
And so I was always taught that the more authentic you are is what's going to draw people. I believe even in like a church setting, kind of what we're used to.
Yeah.
But Gen Zers can smell fakes from a mile away.
Oh,
If a leader gets up there and
So
they're
fake dark.
Mhm.
they try to appear perfect, or they try to appear all together,
Yep.
we can sniff that out because at our core we know there are problems that go on even personally.
Mhm.
And so when somebody else tries to appear a certain way, we can smell that and run from it. And so we strive really for authenticity.
It's true.
And with that lack of being real, they kind of lose the credibility they have with us. Like, they lose the authority to kind of speak into our lives because our radar is really strong. I don't know about you guys, but when I see someone, like, I'm able to tell, like,
Oh yeah.
there's just something
Definitely.
about them.
100%.
Exactly. There's just something there, and it's just like, that doesn't really seem right,
Yeah.
So I feel like when that mask really comes off, like you said, like, that's when we're really able to tell okay, so this person does have the authority instilled by God to speak into our lives.
Yeah.
And because of social media, like you said, there's this kind of duplicate personality of people. And because of that, we're so invested in social media that we kind of become desensitized to what actual human interaction is,
Wow.
And we just lose that touch. And we're kind of, I fall short to this sometimes because I feel like I spend too much time kind of putting up a front of, okay, so I have to appear a certain way in social media. And I do that too. Like, I have to catch myself sometimes because it gets hard, like everything that we do, it revolves around social media. So it becomes really easy to kind of dive into kind of building up what you want to look like to other people.
Bella, something you do that I personally love is, dude, you're a model. First of all, like, you own the camera. But when you post on your Instagram, you're like, hey guys, look at my picture. But this is my picture before I edit it.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Like, it's to show people that not everything gets edited.
Right.
Not everything in real life gets edited, to say.
Yeah,
So
I like doing that because I have to kind of, because there's so much fake in the world, like, and I feel like it's my responsibility because now I'm leading sisterhood. I'm plugging it in real quick for those of you who don't know. It's
Shameless
a girl
plug.
for
Shameless plug.
it's very shameless,
plug.
very shameless. But it's a group for young women who come together and talk about life, and they just do life together.
Which we never would have guessed. Women getting along.
I know, crazy, but in being in that position of leading them, I can't let myself fall into the facade of, okay, I'm perfect online, and when they see me, it's like, okay, like, can we really let you lead us?
Yeah.
So I have to be authentic on Instagram or whatever it is that I'm posting on, because I know what it feels like to be comparing yourself to other people, and I don't want to ever be the reason that someone's doing that to themselves. So I feel like leaders, they have to kind of accept that mentality a little bit more, and we always have to turn back, like I said, to that scripture that I mentioned. We always have to try to really be open and be vulnerable and just honest,
Absolutely. I think I want to speak on that for a second, because there really is a big difference between like a filter and a facade. Like you mentioned with your photo, it appears a certain way, but then when you take the filter off, this is, who they really are, And so I really think filters can be strategic because sometimes they're necessary.
Yeah.
We could be in different situations. If I'm talking to someone that's at a more vulnerable state, I might phrase my words differently. I might communicate with them differently than I would with someone else.
Yep.
But if we have a facade on, people aren't really seeing who you truly are. And so I don't really believe God can even bless who you pretend to be. And so
That's
just
good.
that authentic sort of mindset of being real, being raw, but navigating different relationships and different situations to a certain way. And that'll take us to our next point, talking about self-autonomy. And so we go truthfully from authenticity, being a generation that strives to see people for who they really are. We have an abundance of connection, but we lack true relationships, true intimacy, to now we don't want to be under authority. And so it's the sense of, is it Gen Z versus the world?
And
We call that a cap.
Big
cap.
Big cap.
All
Big cap.
the way.
All the way.
I got it right that time.
I'm so proud.
So proud of you, dude.
I really think it's big for us. I heard that we're the most unchurched generation, and part of that is that we don't want to be under authority.
Yeah.
And so I was having a great conversation with a mentor of mine, and it really led to, okay, why aren't young people in church? Why the church I grew up at, where the general age of it was probably 50 plus, and so you had a lack of young people, but a lot of older people that had stayed there. And we basically came to is that young people don't want accountability. They don't want to be under authority. And so we want to live how we want to live. We want to act how we want to act. We want to follow feelings. We don't want to navigate with truth. And when somebody like a mentor, a spiritual father, spiritual mother, a pastor, a teacher, a principal, a parent wants to keep us accountable, we don't want that. And so this sense of our big father in the sky wants us to live a certain way, do certain things. It turns people off because people just want to live for themselves. It's really Gen Z versus the world.
Yeah, I agree that that's a cap statement because in order to grow, we do need mentors in our life. We do need people to follow. In Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another.
Good.
Wow.
We need each other to grow. We need each other to sharpen ourselves. And the best way to do that is to find mentorship in your life.
So we all go to CLA. CLA is the Leaders Academy here at Connect Church. Something P. Dev said yesterday was, you're called under somebody, not just to a place, not just somewhere. You are called under somebody. And it's freeing because you got somebody behind you coaching you. It's a coach in football.
Yeah.
For sure.
Somebody's calling the plays for you and you got to execute. It's all about, and you got to honor that person because that person's not only investing their time, but they're investing their heart, their love. And Pastor Devin has been such a great influence in my life, and actually accepting mentorship and accepting authority gives me more opportunity and it helps me grow. This growing period of my life would not be what it was without the authority of my leaders at Change Up and the leaders of 508 and our very own pastors. 100% would not be the person I am today without authority.
Wow.
Yeah, speaking on that, not being really who you are now because of that, I remember like my personal story before coming to Connect and before actually getting involved with community. I used to be just out here by myself, like I didn't really have a lot of emotional guidance, spiritual guidance. So I was kind of just in the world doing my own thing, not really knowing where to go. But, when I came to a community that actually understood the importance of leadership, that's when I kind of started to understand the importance of submission. And when you're submitted to someone, that's not saying that, like you have to do everything that they tell you and that you're done like living your own purpose in life. That's not at all what it means.
Yeah.
It just means that first you're given their mission to take care of, and then you're given your own.
So good.
And that's something that, our pastor touched up on yesterday. And that really spoke to me because before like I said, I wasn't really knowing where I was headed. So after I understood the fact that I need a mentor, I need someone to go through life with me, that's when I really understood what it means to truly be a Christian, because you don't want to be out there by yourself. Like,
That's
trust
true.
me, like
Yeah.
when you're going through your hills and valleys, what happens when you get to the valleys? What happens when you're not at your best anymore? What happens when all you have is yourself and you're not really being your best help at that moment?
Yeah.
You need someone to pick you up, and that's what leadership does, and that's what submission to someone else does, because there's someone spiritually watching over you, and you need that.
For sure.
And the thing about being alone is that you're not only beating yourself up, but there's no one there to get your back. There's no one there watching your blind sides, your blind spots.
Yeah.
An article that was sent to us earlier today, 3 ideas for increasing your influence. There's some stats that really bothered me. It had 78% of Gen Zs believe in God, but only 41 attend church. And I think we do that is because we're afraid of accountability.
Right.
And having someone there, having someone watching your blind spots keeps you accountable. Whether it's either going to church on Sundays, whether it's not getting in arguments with your parents every night, it makes you more Christ-like than getting away from Christ.
Wow. That's so good. Yeah, I remember God spoke to me a while back. He said, there's a lot of people that want to be remembered by me, but they don't want the responsibilities of serving me. And so I think there's a certain responsibility that comes on someone's shoulders when they give their heart and give their life up to Christ, which is really, okay, am I going to allow him in? Am I going to allow other people in now? And truly, am I going to get planted in a church? Am I going to live a certain way? Am I going to follow what the Bible says to follow? And not just bank on recognition by God that one day I'll die and he'll remember all my good acts, but maybe I can live by him, live for him, and something like that might show.
That's good. So off of that, we're talking a lot about, being submissive to someone, and that really speaks to emotional maturity. And, the next kind of statement that we want to go through is Gen Z has Peter Pan syndrome.
I'm just going to go right ahead and say cap.
Cap.
Big cap.
And for the people watching us who haven't seen Peter Pan, I'm so sorry. Please get situated, man.
And pause and go. No, I'm kidding.
And okay.
Pause this podcast, go to Disney Plus.
Back
And
it
then
up.
come back.
Yes.
Enjoy yourself.
And
Come
then
back in and finish the
and
rest.
then you're gonna be all caught up. So Peter Pan syndrome is actually, it's not something that we made up. It's actually a psychological term for people who don't want to grow up and they're stuck living in their childish ways. So we're all talking about authority and stuff, but for that, you need to be mature. You really do. And, it's this kind of misconception that people have about us that we don't want to grow up.
Wow.
We just want to stay children for the rest of our lives. And
Come on.
Parents'
trust me,
basements.
yeah, I
the
definitely, trust me, I get the appeal for that. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could just evade all my responsibilities, be in my mom's basement forever, and just chill. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. And
Yeah.
people see that from us, but that's not the reality, you know?
Yeah.
Like, when we say we don't want to start adulting, we're not saying that we're rejecting inevitably growing up, because that's going to happen. We're rejecting kind of what it means, and we're rejecting the norms of what it means to older generations. Because, you know, a lot of people, I don't know about you guys, but especially me, I grew up learning to people like, oh, you grow up, you go to high school, and then you go to college.
Yeah.
You get into debt, and then you have a 9-to-5 job, and then you just bury yourself in your life trying to pay your bills, and then you die. Like, that's what I grew up listening to. And trust me, I have a 9-to-5 job, and paying your bills is something that you're definitely responsible for. Don't give that up to your parents. But, you know, like, we as Gen Zers, we want more than that. And, you know, let's just recap a little bit. So paying your bills is definitely something that you should be responsible for doing. But if that's all adult life has to offer, why would someone want that? Why would someone aspire to actually grow up and be excited for what's coming next? You know, like, we as Gen Zers, we want more than that. We want to aspire for more than life than just paying your bills and then eventually passing away, you know?
Wow.
A thing that goes with maturity is being under authority.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I think that's why we put maturity following authenticity and then following authority. And that's simply because principles don't restrict us, they protect us.
That's so good.
And shout out to Bella. I know you told me that yesterday. I know I'm taking all the credit. I'm sorry. Bella told me yesterday that principles don't restrict us, they protect us. And I think that really comes to play when we are trying to find our way in growth.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely. And, you know, it's funny that I'm talking about us not wanting to grow up because we want to aspire for more. I was reading a few things, and we're actually considered the most passionate generation ever. I mean, like, if you look at what's been happening around us, I mean, the world is a little chaotic. I'm not going to lie to you.
All the protests,
Everything's
all the social
going on.
media posts,
Yeah, everything.
all the hashtags.
Yeah.
Too.
And
it's insane.
Yeah, and, you know, we're the most passionate, and if you look at the facts, we actually started advocating for things way earlier than anybody else before. And, you know, it's awesome that we're so passionate, but because we're so passionate, we need guidance.
Yeah.
A lot of that passion is so misguided, and, you know, I like this analogy in my head for some reason, but when you don't have directions to where you're going, you usually turn to the first street that seems right to you. And that's what happens in our lives so much. Like, I have all this passion inside of me. I want more from life, but if I don't have guidance from someone that's actually overseeing everything objectively, if I don't have that, I'm going to dive into the first thing that seems right to me, and I'm going to give all of my energy into it. And, you know, we need to have guidance for the feelings that we have, and we need to actually be leading all of that into something that's going to be worth our while, and that's going to be, you know, giving us long-term gratification, not just, you know, temporary things.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's a mature sign to seek growth and to seek someone to speak into your life. You know, we kind of camped on this in the last point, but you really can't do life alone. You can't. You could try to. You might make it a couple miles, but you won't make it the distance. And so I've always been kind of known as of late is that to seek out people even to a fault, like where I'm calling up people at 11, 12 at night and just, hey, I need help with this. This might seem like an inconvenience, but your voice is critical. And so I really think having another cook in the kitchen is essential.
That's good.
See if we're going to serve ourselves to the world. I want to make sure my dish is right, you know?
That's really good.
And so if we get under someone else's criticism, even under their compliments, we can better our strengths, better our weaknesses, and make sure the dish that people are tasting is mature, is humble,
Seasoned.
is seasoned.
Not seasoned like the boomers, like
old salt,
seasoned.
pepper,
No, like yummy season.
We're talking like adobo,
Gotcha.
like rich seasonings.
That Latino spice.
Okay,
I'll cook. So.
I said that, and I'm clearly Caucasian. Yeah, you want to be seasoned, you want to be polished, and you really want to make sure that you're okay to be served to the public. You know, I don't want to go out and be a mess. I don't want to go out and, by all means, hurt someone else. I want to make sure before I present myself, I have the approval and the blessing of those above me. That's a
really
mature
good.
sign for sure.
It's really good. And it's funny that we're so passionate, but, you know, I was, like I said, I was reading some articles, and I was comparing them to what I see around us, because clearly I'm Gen Z too. So I'm around us a lot, and, we're actually described as nihilistic, which
Wow.
means we reject all morals and all religion and all the principles.
It's rough.
And that's rough. Yeah, that's a heavy thing to
Right.
carry. That's a heavy label to carry. And that becomes very dangerous when you don't have a line of morals to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, principles, they don't restrict us, they actually free us and they protect us. That's what they were meant to do to us. And a lot of times, if I'm being honest with you, people aren't rejecting religion, or they're not rejecting the principles, they're rejecting how it's being presented to them.
Yeah.
And I think it's not only our responsibility as Gen Zers, but it's in your authority as leaders to learn how to present religion and principles and morals in a way that's going to captivate the audience that you're kind of trying to reach,
For sure.
That's
Like,
good, though.
Generations, they change gradually, but I feel like as Gen Zers, we change so like sudden, and it was
Yeah.
just kind of like an impact for everybody else, because they're like, well, I don't know what to do to reach them. Like, it's kind of hard because there's the lingo barrier, there's the social media barrier that like a lot of people don't know how to navigate. But it really has to change how it's being presented, because even though the message is, it has to stay constant,
Yeah.
the methods need to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's something that our church is really passionate about. Like, the methods, you can't really be married to them. You have to be married to the message that you're preaching. But the way that you do it has to change, or else you're going to lose people. And once you stay so focused on how you're doing it that you don't really care about who you're losing, that becomes very dangerous.
Yeah.
So as people that have authority, they have to assimilate to us, and they have to, instead of dismiss how we function, they have to understand, accept, and minister into it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking, oh my God.
You go.
Speaking of maturity, I think the main thing about maturity, the biggest thing is finding who you are.
Mhm.
And just coming out of high school, all the high schoolers always have trouble finding who they are. And when they're trying to find who they are, it's the culture.
Yeah.
They try to find who they are in the culture.
Mhm.
And I just read this book, Living for Legacy by Brian Bullock, and something that I got out of it and that I absolutely loved is that he said children do what makes them feel good. Adults do what is right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people these days, they justify who they are with what people tell them. They justify
Sure.
who they are with what culture says who they are.
Yeah.
And let's be real. You find yourself when you find Jesus.
Come on.
Good.
You find yourself when you find Jesus. You find your purpose,
Yeah.
because your purpose is essentially a part of who you are.
Yeah.
When you find yourself, when you find Jesus, you find your purpose, you find your calling, you find
Good.
everything you need when you find Jesus. And spiritual maturity, really, it intertwines with emotional, like physical maturity. It intertwines with everything, because we all know we live by
Yeah.
our spirit overcomes all like the aspects of like about who we are, because the spirits of who we really are. We're part of God.
That's good.
And
So good.
we just got to remember that. We
Yeah.
got to remember that we got to be Christ-like, not culture-like.
That's
Absolutely.
really good.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between spiritual maturity and emotional maturity.
Mm-hmm.
But as you progress spiritually, you should be progressing in all these other areas.
Yep.
And
Good.
so I hear a lot of people and they're like, oh, I know the Bible. Oh, I've been to church. Oh, I grew up in church. I just know how things run. I can know my scripture. We go to Bible camps. We do all these different things, and we feel like we're, in some sense, a spiritual giant, but we could be emotionally weak, emotionally unstable.
That's good.
But as you progress spiritually, you should be progressing in all these other areas. But honestly, personal growth, I believe, is a choice. And so I read this great book by John Maxwell, and he basically talks about how you physically grow over time. That's just going to happen. You really don't have to do anything to help that. You can do things to hurt that, like eating fast food, but
Way to
personal
jab at
growth.
me. Come
I
on,
felt
no
that.
need to come for
Chick-fil-A is
me.
excluded, anointed. But personal growth is a choice. And so if I want to grow spiritually, even if I want to grow personally, I have to choose to do so. And so a mentor of mine, he said, you don't fall to your vision, you fall to your habits. And so what am I doing daily that shows I want to grow, I want to mature, I want to be better than I was yesterday? Is that waking up in the morning, maybe with a Devo? Is that getting up a little bit earlier? Is that working out? What does that look like to say, okay, I want to be better than I was yesterday. I want to grow. I want to mature,
Right. That's really good.
Yeah. And so the last portion of this, as we sort of land the plane here, we're going to talk about legacy. And so what is Gen Z's legacy? as a whole, as a generation, but even within the church.
I think before that, even we should mention that we're hungry.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. So, Oscar, I know you have a statement on that one.
100%. So the statement is Gen Zs have it easy. That's a big cap.
Ooh.
That's a big cap.
Nah.
That's a big cap.
Hold it up real quick.
And I have a scripture for this, and this is my favorite scripture of the Bible. It is Romans 12:2. It is, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Awesome.
That by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what
So
is
good.
good and acceptable and is perfect. And people like in the Old Testament, a lot different than the New Testament. In some ways we have it easier, in some ways it's harder. In this new world that we live in, we're not as persecuted as the disciples were, as people were back then in the Old Testament. But right now, in this time, it's a lot easier to be tempted. It's a lot easier.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can
for
literally
sure.
sin by your phone screen for what's on your laptop.
Yeah.
It's in some ways it's harder, and I don't think some people understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have it easier in some ways because of the grace of God and the grace of Jesus Christ that died for us.
It's good.
But in other ways, this world evolved into something that made it hard for us to generally keep at it where we're going.
Yeah.
And it's tough. So I wanted to start off this my bad. I want to start this off with, how do we, live with, non-Christians, and how does our faith affect non-Christians? And I just want to leave it up to one of you to start that off.
I personally think that's one of the hardest parts about being not only a Gen Z, but a Christian Gen Z. Oscar, we just graduated high school together, and shout out to Marlboro High, but we also know that Marlboro High has a lot of lost students.
Oh, yeah.
And being one of the few openly Christian people at school, people saw us a little different. They're like, you don't like to have fun. I'm not going to invite you to this party
Wow.
because you're going to judge me for drinking.
Okay.
And the hard part with that is not only explaining, hey, dude, like, that's not who I am, but it's breaking that stigma that I'm going to judge you for everything you do that you think I think is wrong.
100%.
Wow.
And I said it once, I will say it again. I think that's one of the hardest parts of being a Christian Gen Zer.
100%, because people have this whole, just going back to culture, people have this bad perception of who we're supposed to be because of culture. And all right, so don't judge me, but I was a little bit of a party animal back in high school. Like my first
We ran into each other
Yes,
at
yes,
parties.
yes,
Easy.
okay.
Before
Well,
Christ.
Yeah, before Christ. But after really, I've been devoted to Christianity for 4 years, and
Yeah.
3 of those years were literally steps and steps and steps forward.
Awesome.
And when people see you take those steps, like my family, they noticed, but they only noticed big steps. But people outside of my family that didn't live with me, they saw those steps. And I'm like, something's different with this kid. And it's all about leading by example.
Yeah.
You got to lead by example. One of the last parties I went to was for a friend's birthday. And so I used to be big on drinking with my friends and everything like that. But now I say that I'm retired. And everybody laughs when I say that. It's so funny. But when they asked and when I were in the middle of a party, I remember this girl, she asked, "You're sober?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And "You haven't drinking anything?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Why?" "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm a Christian."
Come on.
And in those instances, there's your opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you led by example,
That's good.
and because you're different than every single person, and that you're leading by what God says, not what culture says, people are going to start asking questions, and people are going to be into so what do you do? Why don't you do this? Were you an alcoholic? Were you this? Were you that? People want to know your story.
Oh, for sure.
People want to know your story. Lead by example, because people don't follow followers, they follow leaders. And and Gen Zers, they know how to dictate what is a follower and what is a leader.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So good.
I know I actually sped by it real quick, but I'm really glad we're going to camp here. I would say with what Oscar's saying is that we can't use this as an excuse to compromise. And so I hear it all the time, even in Christian circles, is, okay, I want to influence somebody. I'm just going to hang around them at parties all the time. I'm going to be around them while they're sinning. I'm going to and so we look at, and it's, Jesus ate with the sinners.
Yeah.
Jesus had dinner with, tax collectors, prostitutes, people that were looked down upon by society, people that weren't necessarily performing right. But Jesus was also perfect. And so we got to make sure that we have boundaries to where, what we want to say, our message isn't being sort of dissolved in our action. And so whether, I'm sitting around my friend and he's smoking weed, that might not be the best time for him to talk to him about Jesus, because that's a bad look for you. And that in some ways it hurts your message, because the temptation's there of, okay, now I can compromise to some extent. So we want to be careful with that for sure.
I think it's a way to open doors, though. Even like in that scenario, that friend that's smoking weed might be like, okay, this dude isn't coming at me for what I'm doing. But then like another day you can have a conversation with him, and that wall that Gen Zs have up will be already like a little lowered because he didn't get attacked.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
And
good, Jen. That's good.
that's what Gen Z does. We put up a wall because we don't want to be attacked. We don't want to be judged.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If a lost person, a lost Gen Zer, does something in front of a Christian Gen Zer, and that Christian Gen Zer jumps to them like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You like, do you know that you're sinning? Like, that is not a way to approach something.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's not an accepting way. As Christians, we are called to love our neighbors. And there's nothing more accepting than to be loved.
That's true. And we have to have that mindset, and we also have to be mindful that in the Bible it says, bad company corrupts good character too.
Yeah.
100%.
So we have to be so careful, because there's a very thin line of being there for them as a Christian example, and also being careful by not enabling them.
That's good.
Because
Absolutely.
when I'm around people, and there's this famous saying, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to draw that line of, okay, I cannot be judgmental, meaning condemnational, because you're supposed to judge in righteousness, but that's a whole nother topic. But
Podcast.
a whole other podcast,
For the
guys.
boomers
Maybe
to
next
take care
time.
of.
Yeah. So you have to really just be very mindful of how you want to approach a situation, because you want to be open where people don't see you as, someone who's going to be condemning them, but you also can't be kind of compromising your own character and your own
For sure.
principles,
That's good.
you
For
know,
sure.
because you don't want to enable them.
Yeah.
100%. That's where discernment comes in.
Yep.
I mean, and that grows with your spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's gonna take for you to leave some friend groups.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
The Bible says that if you follow Jesus, you might have to leave some things that you're accustomed to.
Yeah.
And the Bible and the Christian life is not supposed to be a comfortable life.
Right?
No,
It's
absolutely.
supposed to be something that puts you out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, the more storms you go through, the more growth you're gonna have.
For sure.
What's the difference between a desert and a rainforest?
Yeah.
Desert doesn't rain at all,
Wow.
so it doesn't look like that.
Really?
A rainforest, it rains almost every single day,
Yeah.
It's great.
and it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Because through the greatest storms comes the most amazing
That's
outcome.
good.
Love it.
And so if you gotta distance yourself from a couple of friend groups, that's what I had to do.
Mhm.
I had to distance myself from a couple of friend groups, and I know how tough that is, because these were the kids that I grew up in elementary school, middle school, and I thought like, oh, when I get married, this guy's gonna be my best man.
Yeah.
He's gonna be in my I don't know, one of my grooms.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but when real life
Yeah.
starts kicking in, and when God's knocking on your door, and you be like, let's be real.
Love
Are
it.
they influencing you to do good, to do what culture says,
Yeah.
or are they influencing you to do what God says? That's when it hit me. I'm like, I'm not an influencer.
Mm.
I'm being the influenced.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So once
Right.
I realized that,
Yeah.
I distanced myself. I grew in community, because with faith, you gotta know where you gotta get planted.
Yeah.
You gotta know where you gotta get planted. And when you get planted,
Mm-hmm.
that's the growing period.
Yeah.
And when I finally got planted and I finally grew, and I'm like, and so then So this past year, I started hanging out with those certain friends, and a lot of those friends came to Christianity.
Yeah.
A lot.
Love it.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not because, you know, was like a miraculous thing. No, it's because they saw me distance myself, and they saw what I was doing on the side, and they're like, you know what? If he can do this, I can too.
Love it.
And it's all about leading by example and becoming the influencer instead of being the influenced.
Absolutely. And I'll cap that off real quick as we transition into our last piece of this podcast. But because we're called above reproach, I'll lose my influence if I compromise with someone I'm trying to witness to.
Yeah.
And so if my buddy's drinking and I'm, chugging beer, shotgun, and White Claws with him, okay, how am I going to speak Jesus to this person?
Right,
sure.
What ground do I have,
Yep.
really? And so we're Gen Z, we want influence. And so it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, it's people who honestly just want to be known. They want their voice, they want their actions to matter. But as a Christian, we can just let our actions show.
Yeah.
The Bible says they're not going to know you by your words. They're not even going to know you by what you do. They're going to know you by how you love them.
Yeah.
And so how do we treat people? How do we treat even people within the church?
Yeah.
And does that reflect a life and a relationship with Jesus or not?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to transition into our legacy. And so what do we want to leave you with today as Gen Z? What do we have to give?
Yeah. And I think a big statement that will go into our cap and no cap as a final decision making is Gen Z has something to give.
Come on.
No
I'm
cap.
not even going to touch
No
it.
cap.
No
It's
cap.
Okay.
no cap.
Hands up.
Yeah. Oscar, do you want to take it away?
Of course. So I have these two scriptures and that really speak on legacy to me, and it's John 14:12, which is, "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these he will do, because I am going to the Father." And then Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, which is, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children."
For sure.
And I've said this a lot. With each new year of like a new babies that are born, like, the 2008s, the 2010s, I see things. I'm like, they're getting more, influenced by like worse and worse stuff. Like, it's getting worse and worse, and I see it. Like, my little brother tells me stuff that goes on in his school. I'm like, I wouldn't even dream of doing this when I was this age.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is crazy. So I'm like, I'm gonna get up to you guys. What do you guys think that we can do to leave a footprint on the next generations to come, so we can start making things better and start uplifting those generations?
So good.
So before we reveal the legacy that we came up with as a group, I do want to touch upon that what we want to leave is something you said before, is that first we want to lead by example.
Come on.
And by leading by example, hopefully they'll learn, but we also have to have those conversations.
Yeah,
Change is made through conversations.
it's
100%.
true.
Hard conversations, easy conversations. And whether it's about, hey dude, you shouldn't be vaping in the back of the bus, or want to come to a Wednesday night activate like student leadership with me.
Come on.
It's those small invitations that we leave our mark on the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just planting seeds. Like, a lot of times we kind of get on that responsibility of, oh, this seed has to grow and I have to be the one to enact that. But,
Yeah.
Our job as Christians is really to plant that. And, speaking more practically, we need to start breaking generational chains.
Ooh,
We need to drop this first of all, this culture of hate Christianity. We need to
Yeah.
drop that completely, and we need to start actually preaching and living the gospel for what it really is. It is to love your neighbor, not just the ones that lend you sugar, but also the ones that make it really hard for them to love you, because
Yeah.
we're all hard to love,
Come on.
and we need to understand that, and we need to lead by example, like Oscar said, and we need to truly understand what it means to live a godly life. It doesn't mean that we're going to be perfect. We have to drop that mentality that Christians are perfect. We don't have faults. Like, we do.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to understand that when there's kind of like a basic mindset that people are telling us, oh, you cannot do a certain thing because you're Christian. So if you do, you're no longer a Christian.
Yeah.
you're being a Christian is not by what you do, it's who you follow.
Come on.
And because of who you follow, that's what's going to dictate your actions. You
That's
know,
good.
because you love God, you're going to want to honor him. And in doing so, you're going to break all those generational
Yeah.
culture mindsets that haven't been instilled in us so far. So
Yeah.
we have to, completely kind of transform the way that we see Christianity and how we approach people with that gospel.
One thing that like Pastor Devin Fry says is that we gotta start living like we're fathers and mothers already.
Yeah.
We gotta start thinking about what I'm gonna do right now. How's that gonna affect my kids?
So good.
My kids. That's just such a great point because that's
Yeah.
the same thing that our
Legacy.
generation's gotta do. Legacy.
Yeah.
What are we gonna leave behind for the next person to pick up? That's what Jesus did. He said in John 14:12. He left something behind for us. What are we gonna leave behind
Wow.
for the generations after us, for our kids?
Oh, absolutely. This term annoys me in Gen Z, but everybody calls themselves an influencer. But half of these people, they allow no voices in their lives. They don't want to be influenced by anybody. But honestly, at the end of the day, they think their millions of TikTok followers or their little blue check mark on Instagram basically gives them ground to speak into people.
Yeah.
And so I think as Gen Z, if we really want to make an impact, we have to hear from other generations. And so there's really something that boomers, there's really something that, older people that have progressed on in life can offer us. And so a message to Gen Z would be like, hey man, you don't have it all together. You don't know everything.
Right.
There's a certain sense of wisdom. There's even resources to that older people can offer you that'll actually progress and sort of edify your message to an extent to where just your words couldn't bring that to the table.
It's really good.
All right, so whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, if you didn't hear anything we said this whole podcast, I just want you to listen and remember this one thing, and this is our legacy. So as Gen Z, as Christian Gen Z, our legacy, we cannot be Jesus, but we have to be his reflection.
Come on.
Our goal is to make the most unchurched generation churched. And we want to reach people who are lost to be found and ultimately ending the stigma of a hateful Christianity.
Love
Good.
that. And so quick recap, be authentic, be real. At the end of the day, know what you're doing, know how you're acting, and seek out people who are going to speak into your life and help you progress along the way. Maturity is an action. It doesn't just happen over time. You're going to want to learn. You're going to want to grow. And with that, you need accountability. You need to institute habits and disciplines to help you along the way. You need to basically seek out help from other people. You need to progress to the point where you're hungry enough to see yourself not only grow, but to see an impact happen. And if you want to make an impact for the kingdom, but you want to make an impact for yourself as well and leave behind a legacy, that's going to require a faith in Jesus, and that's going to require a lot of hunger, a lot of passion, a lot of stride. But I believe you could do it. Anything else you guys got to add?
No, you pretty much summed it up.
You
Right.
got it.
Hi guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that blessed you. If it did, please show us some love. Like, subscribe, comment, send it to a friend that really needs to hear it, or maybe a boomer, who knows. So show us some love, and remember that here at the 508, we don't fear the future, we pioneer it.